Since it first started tumbling into Ireland through the old pirate coves of West Cork and in the stomachs of drug mules coming from Miami, cocaine has become the drug of our nation. It has swept in like a blizzard, dusting every corner of every small town, and so swift and total has its spread been that the Irish are now some of the biggest users in the world. But to unravel how a small island like ours on the edge of Europe ended up such a big player in the major cocaine leagues, we must follow the white supply lines back to the beginning. We must follow the routes it has taken as it travels across the globe. And most importantly, we need to follow the cowboys who put us on the map. So join me, Nicola Talent, for my new live show, Cocaine Cowboys, the story of Ireland's love affair with Colombia's biggest export. Limited tickets now available for February 10th at the Lime Tree Theatre in Limerick, February 15th in Cork's Everyman, and at Dublin's 3 Olympia on Sunday, February 18th. Tickets available at venues or on mcd.ie. So the fallout from Christmas Eve and what happened in Blanchardstown is ongoing. There's a number of issues there at the moment. Firstly, certainly we know that the body of Tristan Sherry has not been yet released back to the family. There's no funeral arrangements there. While we believe the same to be the case with Jason Hennessy Snr, the other victim in this, we don't know exactly why it's taking so long. 17 days at this point since those, certainly since the murder of Tristan Sherry occurred.
Yeah, I mean, it's very unusual length of time. Normally in Ireland, obviously people are buried quite quickly. You know, people will have experience of people being buried 2 to 3 days after. Whenever there's a homicide or a death of that type, it's normally within 7 to 9 days somebody will be buried after forensic investigations, post-mortems. So 17 days is kind of unheard of. Obviously, everything about this situation is a bit unheard of, but 17 days is a really, really long time.
So now, in the case of Tristan Sherry, and he died after he was sort of stabbed at the restaurant that night. There's 3 people charged in relation to his death, and there's been a 4th person arrested, released without charge. But in the case of that, I suppose, what could be the reasons that his body would be held by the state for so long? I mean, obviously with forthcoming court cases, they do need to make sure that the coroner's reports are all as thorough and accurate as possible. Yeah,
I mean, obviously we're speculating, but there can be normally there would be those coroner's reports, and they would then be presented in court in the case of, you know, a violent death, and you'd hear, people will be familiar with it again, you'd hear a coroner's report read out in court as you do during trials. Sometimes bodies aren't released because a family can also have make a request to have an independent post-mortem conducted. That can delay proceedings as well. And then, of course, there can always be dispute about, you know, who takes charge of somebody's remains. But normally these things don't go on as long. Obviously, there is a fear that any funerals could give rise to serious tensions. There's 2 people have died in that part of the world, and funerals can be flashpoints. So people are looking out for these funerals, and the guards have been stepping up patrols in Corduff. Obviously, the 4th man was released. I suppose
to say, though, that wouldn't be a reason for the state to withhold the remains of somebody from a family.
No, it wouldn't be, but it does add to that sense of you know, of fear in that community that these funerals have yet to take place visibly, and, you know, there are concerns that there will be a flashpoint. Obviously, what we know about the 4th man, he was a teenager who was arrested and was released without charge. Certainly, from what we've heard, the suspicion was that he was going to be questioned about the removal of the gun from the scene of the restaurant in Blanchardstown. He was going to be questioned about CCTV that appeared to see a man removing the gun from the scene, which is yet to be recovered. Obviously, that was the gun that Tristan Sherry fired in a public restaurant, shooting Jason Hennessy Snr, who subsequently passed away. So that was that part of the investigation, but charges were not brought on this occasion.
So it was Brown's Steakhouse, and it was 8:00 on Christmas Eve when Sherry entered the restaurant and opened fire on a group who were sitting down having a meal with the submachine gun. And again, while there's people before the courts, there's very little more we can say other than he became the subject of a murder himself and was disarmed.
Yeah, he was disarmed. The gun jammed. He was subsequently disarmed and died as a result of a violent confrontation, I suppose. So what we know about Tristan Sherry is that he was a part of a feuding gang in that part of the world. He'd been part of the court of feud. The man that he ultimately killed, Jason Hennessy Snr, was also a part of a rival criminal faction. Jason Hennessy Snr was somebody who's been universally described as coming late to criminality. However, he was he had become a very serious operator in recent years, in particular, as part of a violent drug gang that particularly seemed to focus in on using very heavy intimidation tactics. And his death as a senior figure within that organisation, that is partly why the fears of safety in the area are so strong, is because he was a serious player. And, there is certainly a palatable fear that something is going to kick off again, I suppose.
What stands out is the age of a lot of the people involved. Certainly some people charged in relation to this, obviously, of Tristan Sherry himself, and then big jump to the age of Jason Hennessy Snr. I had described earlier on a pod, and I was obviously away when all of this story was unfolding, but that, he was seen as the target. Now, was he? Or
well, we don't know obviously what went through Tristan Sherry's head, but Jason Hennessy, from what we know, when Tristan Sherry came in with this weapon, raised it to start shooting, that Jason Hennessy seems to have put himself in the way, and at least that's what we've heard, which has been put on social media. So whether he was the target or not, he seems to have at least an associate,
the way of
put himself in the way, and was shot subsequently in the neck. So I mean, it's still an absolutely horrific incident that occurred.
Now look, I presume that the area has been flooded by police.
The area has
been... the moment. How long could that last?
Well, I mean, as you know yourself, even at the absolute height of the Kinnan Hutch feud, I mean, it lasted for probably for months then, did it? That sort of swamping of Dublin's north inner city. It can't go on forever.
Was it a slightly easier area to do that in?
Well, it was both. It was an easier area. There's naturally a lot of police there anyway. Also, it was so high profile, and the risk was so high that there was going to be very little quibbles about overtime or anything like that. Corduff is obviously, and the Blanchardstown area is much more suburban.
Yeah.
So it can't go on forever. And obviously these people can lay low until they get an opportunity. But if you look at the tensions that led to this moment in terms of Tristan Sherry, it's going on a long number of years, and it is a serious concern. There's just no doubt about it.
When we look back to the Kinahan Hutch feud, which is somewhat a little bit in the past, even though it's obviously still, the tensions are still there, but those funerals in particular, when there was the David Byrne and the Eddie Hutch funeral, they were seen as massive flashpoints, as massive potential places, events of which could have resulted in violence. I think the churches were searched for you know,
if you look back at David Byrne's funeral, there was talk of grenades being thrown into it and everything. I mean, obviously these things didn't happen, thank God, but
there was a bit of an iron ring put around those funerals. So it was just in case that anybody saw an opportunity to take a pot shot at somebody. And also there was that idea. I mean, it probably is a psychological sort of, psychology comes into it as much as anything else when you're looking at a policing plan in these situations, that tensions will lessen a little bit. And obviously there is those kind of, levels of tension. They talk about critical threat levels and all the rest of it. And I think Blanchardstown in this particular feuding incident is probably at a critical threat level just at the moment, until maybe those funerals and
we've seen funerals even in recent times, even in the case of Brandon Ledwidge, where there was violent incidents afterwards. We've seen it many times through many funerals that tensions get high. Obviously, emotions start running. People are also able to congregate at these type of events legitimately, if you know what I mean.
They probably feel a little bit of safety in numbers.
Exactly, and they're not likely to be bugged or anything like that. So they have been a flashpoint. I mean, every year we'll have a couple of cases reported in the Sunday World where there was violent outbursts at various funerals or in graveyards even. So that's probably a big concern at the moment. To see that happen and then pass would be a thing that Gardaí would want, I would imagine.
So the three men charged in relation to the attack on Mr. Sherry so far: David Ama, 18, with an address in Hazel Grove, Portrane Road, Donabate. He's been charged with the murder of Mr. Sherry. Wayne Deegan, who's 25, and he's from Fibblstown, was charged with assault causing harm to Mr. Sherry, producing a knife in a way likely to intimidate or injure, and committing violent disorder. And at the end of December, Michael Andrecut, 22, from Corduff, appeared at a special sitting of the Criminal Courts of Justice in Dublin, charged with Mr. Sherry's murder. That's where it stands at the moment. And no doubt we'll be coming back to this over the coming days.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Niall.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.